think could be a monster home. So what is it?
Okay, so a monster home is, first of all, that's a term that the people who oppose it have come up with to describe their feelings for the house rather than to actually describe the house. But what describes the house is the laws that the city council has passed intending to keep that type of home from being built specifically in Kaimuki, although it applies to more than just Kaimuki. And of course, well, the process of making this law against a monster home is something that's, you know, it's kind of dear to my heart, that it's done all wrong. You know, it's like you can't have your planning department planning against things. They really need to plan for things. A good example would be special design districts. And this is something, again, that I've thought, if they really want to protect the charm of Kaimuki, or the charm of the maybe 50% of Kaimuki that's still charming, if they want to protect that, they should make it into a special design district.
Design district, yeah.
Because then that gives them the opportunity to make judgments as to what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Right now, the DPP and all of the various agencies that are connected to DPP don't have the right to say, I'm sorry, that is an ugly house. We don't want that in a nice, quaint neighborhood in Kaimuki. They feel that way, and that's primarily why people don't like monster houses. If you couldn't see the monster house, they wouldn't care. But you know, there's a couple of things that happen with that type of house. Like Doug's example of the illegal rental is pretty good. You've got to have parking for all of that. You've got to have adequate sewers and fire department. Everything has to be adequate for that, and it's not. So
and parking is absolutely never adequate.
Right.
There's no way that that's adequate. You put in 28 people in that one home, and usually people have two cars, husband and wife, and they're up and down several blocks parking, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, and like I said, I'm a little bit simpler in the sense that if you had a special design district, you would have a vehicle that's been tested over time as to how you enforce it, how you incentivize people. Special design districts typically give you a bonus for like historic houses. If you've got a historic house, you don't pay tax on it. There's all kinds of things that they've done to protect specific little houses in specific areas. And you know, there's a few historic houses in Kaimuki that are protected because they've got the little plaque on the wall and it says they're historic.
Right.
But there's a lot of them that aren't on the register for historic homes, and it wouldn't be because they're not exceptional. Theoretically, the historic register is for exceptional houses, and there's a lot of them that are just very average, ordinary, everyday houses that are really charming and lovely, you know, and they're not going to get that kind of protection. So how do you protect the community? People move into Kaimuki because it's a charming old community, and we're losing that because of what people are calling monster houses.
But the big boxes. Yeah,
I think we're losing it because of poor planning on the part of the building department and poor enforcement. You know, I could go out there and I could walk up and down the street and find 100 buildings and 100 parking conditions that would be fine tomorrow. Why can't they send someone out there to do that? You know, the law says you can't do this. You can't have that monster house that you're talking about on Updaling. There's no code that ever would allow that.
Isn't it affecting people that aren't building a monster house, like the example I gave? They just want a very large home because they're very wealthy and they just want 10, 15,000 square feet of home to be in, but they're not having 22 bathrooms.
Right.
Um,
So that's what's called unintended consequences of a poorly written bill. And in fact, I have a client who is on the marina at Hawaii Kai. He's owned the house for 15 or 20 years. Built it, I mean, he remodeled it 20 years ago when he was a young man. Now he's not so young anymore. And in fact, he's using a walker to get around, and his doctor told him he's going to have a wheelchair before the end of the year. And his house is already a big house, but he has the money, and he lives in Chicago in a house that's huge. His house in Chicago is huge. And he wants to leave Chicago permanently and move to his house in the marina for the remainder of his life. And in order to do that, he wants his house in Hawaii to be approaching his big house in Chicago. He realizes that he doesn't have enough land to have a mansion. And Hawaii Kai Marina is not exactly the right place for it. But we've done a design for his house that would give him 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and an elevator so that he can get up and down because he's handicapped. And he has the money to do it. You know, he's selling his house in Chicago, and he can afford to have the nicest house on the marina.
but he can't do it here because why?
The House bill says that he can't. He has to have an 8-foot setback. Everything he's built is already at a 5-foot setback. It's actually ironic because the house is enclosing a central courtyard. And the courtyard is one of the things that makes it very nice. Where you drive in, it's on the street, which is okay because up there you can still see the ocean across the street. And then your other half is on the marina, and you're looking out at the boats in the marina. And then in the courtyard, you've got privacy and an inward-looking landscaped kind of an environment. But we didn't want to fill that in. In other words, we could fill that in because that's not in the setback. What we wanted to do is continue with, now the side property lines are tight to.
So that wouldn't be like grandfathered, the setback?
No, well, you see, that's a legal question. Now, given enough money, he could, and he's got enough money, but he doesn't want to spend the rest of his time in litigation over what his rights are. And so he'd rather sell this house, find a new lot somewhere else, not his favorite place to live, where he can build the house that he wants. And in some cases, the house that he needs. He needs to have wider hallways. He needs to have bigger doorways. He needs to have more space to be able to wheel his way around furniture. You know, it's a perfect example of unintended consequences.
No,
And it's a shame. It's a shame. He's a really nice guy, and he's not going to be. I think this is the first Christmas he's missed in years.
So is this an elusive target here that the city is going to be unable to stop the 28 bedroom models here?
I see nothing that tells me they're going to. I mean, I'd love it if they would. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of ideas. I'm primarily an idea person. There's all kinds of parts of architecture. For me, I'm the idea guy, and that spills over into my life. I have ideas about things, including how you should plan for this, how you should enforce things. All those things, I have ideas about that. They're never going to ask me. You know, that's all there is to it. I can volunteer to help them out. They don't want any help. You know, so, and I could use this as an example. Now, the other thing is I don't have time in my life to dedicate it to pursuing that. It's like homeless housing. I spent 5 years trying to get homeless housing actively progressing. Failed. You know, just failed. I was just worn out.
So it sounds like monster homes are here to stay and proliferate.
And people with money enough to build a really nice house are going to be stopped. Accidentally, though.
What a problem.
Yeah.
Had no idea.
Yeah. Well, there's more. There's the CPR issue.
Tell us about that.
Okay. I had a client who bought a lot in the back of Manoa Valley. And it was a CPR lot. It was an acre of land, and it was CPR into 8 house lots. And the monster house bill does not address CPR. And we brought this to the former director's attention, and we're told that they're writing a correction to it, because obviously if you've got 8 houses on an acre, it's the same as if you subdivided it into 8 lots. And the guy who had bought this, it already had everything in. Infrastructure was already in. It was an ideal project, absolute ideal. It was beautifully done. Had Manoa Stream going around it. It was just, everything about it was nice. But for the 8 houses that they're planned, and the infrastructure for 8 houses is already in place. Everything is in place for 8 houses. They're only allowed 5 bathrooms for their 8 houses, because they treat the lot as if it was a 5,000 square foot lot. Even though it's on a 40,000 square foot lot, you're allowed 8 5,000 square foot footprints. And, it's like, so
Will
they,
this affect like a high rise? Like building a building in Waikiki?
no, I don't think so, because it's pretty much designed for R5 and R7 zoning. Even R10, you can build a pretty big house without impacting on the monster house bill. You can't build 28 bedrooms, but you can build a big enough house to be desirable. And by that I mean not make the neighbors hate it. I've done big houses in neighborhoods that have fit in really well because we've planned it. We want to make a house that the neighbors like, and it's not hard to do if you've got a goal. But on the other hand, if you're trying to legislate that, it's really, really hard to cover all of the things that you don't want. You don't want them launching rockets to the moon off that lot, right?
Yeah.
So no one thought of that. So someone's going to launch a rocket, But if you're planning for something, then you encourage good design. You give people rewards for doing good design.
So it's such a minefield. So if you're buying a house or buying a vacant lot, there's a lot more due diligence one would have to do now to make sure that they can do what they intend on doing. Yikes.
That's right. And it's not restricted to Kaimuki. You might be in Kahala on a lot that you want a big house on, and you could get impacted in Kahala. They're told, nope, sorry, you can't build that house. Yeah, I know your neighbor's got one that's that big, but you can't.
Well, this was more than I thought. This is is crazy. This is very disturbing, actually.
Especially because it's such a good idea to get rid of big, ugly houses in quaint, cute neighborhoods. I mean, there isn't anybody out there who wants to see an ugly house, ever. Now, ugly is a subjective thing, so that makes it really hard. I don't have any trouble at all saying that's ugly, and I don't have any trouble saying that's a beautiful house.
And here's this definition. Here's this definition thing again. I mean, you're using ugly. I'm mostly concerned with 22 kitchens and all the parking issues. And
that's simply a matter of enforcement.
And here's someone that wants to build a big home for themselves and probably can't do that now. That's big minefield. Well, thank you, Jim.
Let me say the worst one is the CPR, because that would have been 8 medium-priced homes.
Just normal houses, yeah.
Normal houses that would sell in the 100,000. In the less than the $1 million range. A new house less than $1 million on a new lot in a nice neighborhood. That would have been something that they would have sold out overnight.
Unintended consequence, and
right.
They're not monster homes.
Right, but and that's what they want. They want that kind of development. This is not a good way to encourage what you want.
Okay, this is can of worms, most assuredly here. Okay, well, we need to wind this up. Thank you, Jim. Very informative. now I don't know what to do.
Well, sometime when you've got more time, we'll sit down and write it all out.
Okay.
Because I've got a lot of ideas of how to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for listening. And this was a topic many people had asked me to talk about. So thank you, Jim, for sharing your wisdom on this one. Well, until next week, thank you all and have a great new year.
Thanks, Doug.
Bye.